This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Alpha Natural Resources, an energy company dedicated to respecting the land. Alpha Natural Resources, we power the world through the energy of our people. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, promoting the free enterprise system to enhance economic competitiveness. Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and a special welcome to our two senators as guests. Someone suggested I call this the Ruff and Reeves show, but it is This Week in Richmond, and Senator Frank Ruff, member of the House since 1994, and then the Senate beginning in 2000.
That's correct. Well,
and
thank
Senator
you.
Bryce Reeves, welcome to you. A member of the Senate since 2012, elected
That's
just
correct.
last year, and this calendar year, this past session being your first session. Delighted to have the two of you on to talk with not only your constituents, but with our viewers around the state about issues that you see that are going to be on the front burner for the 2013 session. Senator Ruff, I'm looking to you to start, and then Senator Reeves, and then you all are welcome to talk back and forth to each other and ignore me if you wish. And if I want to say something, I'll jump in. So, Frank, if you'll start.
Well, you never know exactly what's going to be on the session, but there are always going to be some surprises. But we know that the governor has been focused on K through 12 education. We know that there are some folks who are ready to try to move forward on something on transportation. I think there'll be a fair amount of discussion about how we deal with the Medicaid issue as we move forward, and then certainly what's important to a lot of us is uranium and whether it should be mined in Virginia or should not.
Okay, Senator Reeves.
Well, I'll just pile on since we're opening that can of worms. But we have a lot of issues, probably more than what would normally come up in a session. I mean, we're dealing with the fiscal cliff. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with sequestration as well? I think is going to be something that eventually we're going to have to deal with that if Congress doesn't get their act together and continue to kick that can down the road. And then the Affordable Care Act, and what does that truly mean as far as what's required of Virginia? How do we approach that? Do we expand Medicaid? Do we wait for the federal government to set it up? What's in the best interest of Virginia, our constituents, and where we go from there? And transportation will definitely be something I think we as a body in the General Assembly are wanting to get done, because that hinders our ability to increase our goal of creating more jobs and getting commerce rolling in Virginia. So there's a lot on our plate. Even if you took one little piece of that away, that'd be a big problem. So we've got a few problems that are going to take some innovation and solutions to solve.
And this all in 46 days.
You got it.
That's right. And there are issues that in better times we could say, okay, things are going to always be better, so we can move on down the road and take care of part of it and worry about the rest later. We have now found, after the last 4 years, that that's not always the case. And we're not being responsible if we pass these problems on to the next generation or the next session or whatever it may be. We need to act responsibly and do what has to be done. Sometimes that's not very pleasant. We have known for over a decade that the amount of money that we're putting into maintenance of our roads has not been enough to allow any construction to amount to anything. So we borrowed money for the last several years, but we really can't do that anymore. We really we have to face the reality that we're going to have more to go into transportation because of the cost of building roads, the cost of material, the cost of payroll. We can't do what we could when taxes were first raised 25 years ago, plus cars are far more efficient than they were then, so you get a lot more miles
You
per
were
gallon.
riding horses back then. I believe.
And I even bought cars too. So, I think that all of us have a stake in that, whether it's Northern Virginia or Tidewater. They have the most immediate, but what happens or does not happen there affects the rest of the state.
And you're referring to way back in 1986 when the amount of the gasoline tax was last adjusted. I don't know how the two of you gentlemen think about it and how your constituents think about it, but I've always been one that thought that whatever gets spent on transportation is kind of like a user fee. That if I'm going to be using the roads, then I should be willing to help pay for that.
Well, that's true, but there was a poll that was in the Richmond Times-Dispatch this past week or weekend, and that most people were against putting tolls on roads until you talked about the issue of whether you ought to raise gas taxes or put tolls on roads, and then they were for tolls on the roads. So it's who's oxy's gourd often.
Well, and I think it's going to take a comprehensive. There's not one solid cure to this thing, and I think part of the challenge for us in the General Assembly is we are so busy, and there are so many different areas that you get pulled in directions that it's sometimes very difficult for us to even get in the same room to spend 10 minutes to talk about certain issues that are important, one, to our constituents, but as an overall plan. And I think, ultimately the governor's office has to lead on some of these issues and become the tip of the spear, and it's going to take the executive to kind of set that pace and where we go. And as Frank mentioned early in the segment, K-12 education is definitely something the governor wants to look at, and I really feel like those of us in the General Assembly want to move forward on transportation, but like I said, there's no magic bullet for it. If there was, we'd already have it done. So we're going to have to make some hard choices, but I think by and large, I think there's a feeling in the General Assembly that we've got to do this because, and how do we do it? Do we take a little bite at the apple? Do we do a major bite at the apple? What are those places? And one of our colleagues already came out recently with what he felt was a pretty decent plan, and I think that's a great starting point to start the dialogue and the conversations. And once you're in session, it's all about what bills are going in, but it's that pre-work to get us to where we actually have that goal of what we're trying to solve and solutions. And we didn't get hired to come down here to create roadblocks or kick that can, and I think we're going to get some stuff done this year.
And if your constituents have concerns, it's really time for them, if they haven't already talked to you, to be talking with you.
Correct.
This is the time of the year when they start communicating their wants and their desires, and I always try to tell them there's not enough resources to meet all those wants and desires, so we have to set priorities, and that's really the biggest job we have is how do you choose between several or a lot of good policy plans without breaking the backs of the taxpayer.
Senator Ruff, if I may ask you too, you chair the General Laws and Technology Committee over in the Senate, and over in the other chamber there's a General Laws Committee, then there's the one that deals with technology. You have both of them under your responsibility in the Senate.
We're much more efficient in the Senate
That's
than they are in the
exactly
House.
right.
So, yeah.
I set you up for that.
That's right, yes. We just felt like, excuse me, that when the technology issues came up, that it was too complicated to create more committees. When I was in the House was about the time they created the Technology Committee. When you start looking at the number of committees they had back then, and then you start dividing that into subcommittees, it was awfully hard to get quorums for anything because in those subcommittees because people were trying to be in too many places at one time. We feel like in the Senate it's much more efficient to have the bills come to fewer committees and try to get the work done rather than having people run all over the place.
Tell our viewers, if you will, some about the breadth of bills that you get, because they may wonder, general laws, what does that imply?
That covers about what everything nobody else covers. It goes from a lot of contracting issues that can get pretty detailed. It deals with all the gambling issues and lottery issues, the issues with the National Guard. A lot of those things are come to us. So it's just a wide array of bills.
And the committees that you serve on too, tell our viewers something about your committees.
Well, I work for this guy. And we did a lot of procurement bills last session. You know, how we're going to do that, make them equitable, and those sorts of things, and a lot with technology folks from Northern Virginia. A lot of those folks had some skin in the game and wanted to make sure that their points were taken. I serve on courts of justice as well. I'm one of the few non-attorneys on courts of justice, but maybe that's a good thing. Then I serve on social services and rehabilitation and privileges and elections. So I've enjoyed it. We're pretty busy when we're in session, just going to all the various committees. We don't have a lot of subcommittees. I know in courts of justice, we heard everybody that had a bill came forward. All those bills were heard. So that the work hours were a lot, and so but we enjoy it. You know?
Senator Ruff would probably remember this, but it wasn't too far back in history that there was a crisis in your chamber when there were not enough lawyers who wanted to serve on the courts committee, and the proposal at that time was to reduce the number of members on the committee. But that didn't fly with folks in either party, and so the courts committee seems to, as an observer seeing it, has worked well with having non-lawyers on that committee, and it hasn't been that long that that's happened in the Senate.
Well, I have a law enforcement background, so I have an end user, so to speak, of a lot of the code section of Virginia. So
Yeah.
I bring a different viewpoint, and you know, I sit between a prosecutor and a defense attorney, so I'll lean right or left sometimes, depending on and get their viewpoints as well on the dais there. But I think it's important. I think it's important to have a general understanding of our code section, especially our criminal code section. And you know, we hear everything from criminal to civil to tort reform to everything, to hear judges, which is another whole issue in itself. But yeah, I think it's great.
And Senator Ruff, one of your other committee assignments is the Senate Finance Committee. Now that's a major heavy lifting on that committee.
Yes, I was assigned to that committee last year, and I chair the capital projects, which in tough times there isn't a whole lot of money to be spent on capital projects, but you end up, if you don't do what you need to do as you do it, then it comes back to haunt you. But yes, it takes far more time than any other committees, except for maybe courts of justice. But we each have 3 or 4 subcommittees. We go around the state when we're out of session to see how things are really affecting different parts of the state. We were down in Tidewater to look at the issues about the Chesapeake Bay and the Port Authority. We were in. We've been to some of the law enforcement facilities. We've been to some of the colleges just to see how public policy is affecting them and how we need to adjust from time to time.
You were there as a member of Senate Finance, and you as a member of the Senate were both at the Senate Finance retreat that was held recently. As you've had a little bit of time since that retreat to reflect on it, what are some of the takeaways that you have as you think about the upcoming session?
Well, the purpose of that is to dampen everybody's expectations of what might be available. In good years and bad years, there's always the same discussion about how horrible it's going to be in various shades, so that hopefully fewer proposals will be put on the table that will cost money. If they achieve that, that's a pretty good goal. There are some very serious questions about what we're going to do. This Medicaid issue is something that may look attractive to have a state exchange. It may for a couple of years, but all the rules are not written for that yet. So we don't know what we will be getting if we bite into it. We do know that the amount of federal money will be dropped back. At the same time, it expands Medicaid, and once somebody believes an entitlement is theirs, it's awfully hard to take it back away from them. So unless we have well, the governor will have the first say in that process, but it probably will be a continuing conversation. And unless there's an automatic way to get out of it, if certain things don't take place, then I think it'd be very dangerous to get into. It does open up Medicaid for some more folks. Some of them desperately need it, but if we're not careful, the reality is that right now we do not have enough doctors. We do not have enough medical facilities to handle all the needs of all the people that may believe that they deserve it if it's free. And so we may say that they can go to the doctor and not pay, but if they can't get into a doctor's appointment, then they're going to go to the emergency room, and the financial costs are going to be there both ways. So there's a lot to be considered and thought about in that process.
And probably following up on that one major point that you made about the shortage of providers, that's just not a Virginia issue. That's pretty much nationwide, and would be. So it's not as though we can get some more in from North Carolina and other states where they got an abundance of physicians.
Well, we've done some things. There are various schools that are being created to have more doctors. Liberty has started something. King College is talking about doing something. But if it's not, if the reimbursement for Medicare and Medicaid is not sufficient to take care of people, then why would a current doctor advise a young person to go into medicine? It's just not going to happen. So we may have the schools, but we may not have the bright young people to go into those schools.
Mm-hmm. And it seemed like there was some mention, not necessarily a big discussion, about physician assistants or nurse practitioners and what their scope of services would be. But again, that's something for you all to wrestle with, because that's like in the Virginia Code about what they can and can't do.
Well, I think when you talk about some of these ancillary occupational fields related to healthcare, you've seen a movement to go more managed care, to preventive care, some of those things. But the reality is, at some point in a person's life, their health is going to change, and it's how they respond and to medical care and those sorts of things. But as we move these chess pieces across the table on how we adjust Medicaid, Medicare, those reimbursements, you can't move a piece without affecting another piece. And so, we need to look at certificate of needs for hospitals, the mandated charity that they're required to provide. They're already, it's the only industry in the world, or at least in the United States, where if you walk into my hospital room, I'm required by law to treat you. There aren't a lot of private businesses that are required by law to do something for you. And so that in itself is unique to that industry, and yet we're continuing to pile more and more and more on doctors, medical providers. You've got the whole insurance equation there. They're in business to make money as well. And so how do insurance companies stay profitable now that they're required to change the makeup of their, accept everyone? Well, that comes at a cost as well. So we've really got to dissect this thing and figure out how we do move these pieces in order to get where we need to be in the best interest of the Commonwealth without making us go broke.
Now, Bryce mentioned that going into the hospital is the only place that you have to take somebody. And the reality, though, in medicine, the healthcare, that's the only thing that we don't act like true consumers in.
That's it.
When we go to the grocery store, we make a choice between buying hamburger or steak or beans. When we go to the doctor's office, we just say we want service. And we don't find out what it's going to cost until either we get ready to leave, until we receive a bill in the mail, or the insurance company tells us what our portion is. And that is not a good model for anybody. We should always be aware of what's the cost and what's the value to your household.
And, I'm not one to knock the doctors, and certainly you all aren't doing that either, but I've heard of times that maybe doctors were inclined to have tests run because you needed to have tests run at times to help pay for the equipment that you had to have, and so there's there's that difficult side of it too, whether it's doctors or hospitals who spend millions of dollars for expensive equipment, and they've got to run enough of us through that to make that cost effective for them.
I won't chase that issue down, but how many times do you go into a car car lot and say, I want that car? I don't know that too many people do that. I think
No.
most people will say, well, what's the difference between that one and this one? And start trying to negotiate some kind of price.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think as innovation proceeds, especially with medical procedures, this stuff's not cheap. And so certain tests are going to cost a certain amount. But when you talk to doctors, they'll tell you sometimes they order these tests because they're worried about liability exposure.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
Right.
to make sure that we have adequate liability for these doctors, we need to look at tort reform. Well, that's not something everybody's been talking about a little bit, but it is an absolute piece of the pie. And so as we try to work from acute care to preventive care, then, do we need to order all those extra tests? Well, probably not. I'm not a medical provider, but I can tell you that some of those tests are exactly that. For those reasons, just like when doctors got hot on antibiotics and saying don't give your child an antibiotic or give them a script every time they come in, because the results of that were superbugs. And so those are some of those cost increases that we see. So it's almost a holistic approach to the same thing we're
Right.
doing for transportation. Is you can't just move one piece. We have to look at the whole thing, and everybody's going to have skin in the game and give a little bit, and for us to make this thing actually work.
And in case my doctor would be seeing the program, I need to make one other statement too to show my other side. I have my annual checkup coming, so I got a call from the nurse in the office, blood test. The doctor said, "Do you want XYZ test run at the same time?" And my answer was yes. Again, your point, I didn't say, now how much is that going to cost to have that test run? But instead of just running every test that you could conceivably run with taking someone's blood, the consumer was at least given that choice,
Right.
but not told what it would cost.
So you don't get in trouble with the doctor, maybe we better move to a different issue.
Right, yes. Thank you very much. We have just another 2 or 3 minutes, so let's make sure we cover some other issue that you wanted to mention, and you mentioned uranium.
That is a lot of folks in my area somewhat concerned, and rightly so, because it's not an issue that can be dealt with simply and say, okay, this looks like it's right. We have to be pretty sure that there's not going to be a long-term risk to the health or well-being of any Virginian that's unnecessary. And I think that the folks in Tidewater and the folks in Southern Virginia have that concern, and I suspect the folks up in Bryce's area that east of the Orange County area are probably going to have those same concerns. We have to be very, very careful before we take a step like that. This is something that cannot be reversed once it's started. You're talking about essentially pulling granite out of the ground, and what their proposal is, for every 100 pounds of granite they pull out of the ground and grind up, they will try to then return 99 pounds and almost 2/3 of that back into that same hole. Well, anybody who's dug a hole will tell you can't get as much dirt back into a hole as you took out. And at the same time, you've changed the composition of what's in the ground, and how that will affect the water of the folks downstream is a serious consideration. How that will affect economic development downstream. In the world today, economic developers eliminate places before they even know they're considered. So if a politically correct business industry were to be interested in the area and they saw the headlines that uranium was going to be upstream, those areas would be eliminated from consideration. So there's a give and take on the economics of it. There's a question on health issues of it, and so we need to be very, very careful before we do anything.
And I think our time is up, but Senator Reeves, I think he kind of summed up the issues that you all
Absolutely.
will be wrestling with on the uranium and on other issues that we we thank you very much. And I think we could call it the Ruff and Reeves Show. And thank the two of you very much.
Well,
Look forward to having a
pleasure.
conversation with you on as the session moves forward.
Thank you, David.
Sounds great. Thanks, David.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Alpha Natural Resources, an energy company dedicated to respecting the land. Alpha Natural Resources, we power the world through the energy of our people. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, promoting the free enterprise system to enhance economic competitiveness. Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.